It's off to Leonard, defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger?
Boston Lowry with the steal. He has Giannis behind him, gets to Leonard. Stuff a facial by Kawhi Leonard.
And that's it. There's a new NBA champion, and it's a team from Toronto, Canada. We, the North, are now we, the champions. The Raptors, the 2019 NBA champs.
Every year, there's almost certainly a bona fide MVP of the playoffs who looks like the best player on the planet. This person, more often than not, also wins the NBA title and the Finals MVP. Nikola Jokic last year, Steph Curry the year before. Sometimes it's not a player from the championship team, like LeBron in 2018, still regarded as one of the most epic playoff runs of all time by one single player. Well, we're talking about an equally epic or even a greater single-player playoff run of a player that came into a team for just 1 year and instantly became arguably the best player of the franchise. Of course, I'm talking about 2019 Kawhi Leonard and just how good that version of Kawhi was. I'd actually like to start this with a background of how exactly Kawhi got to the Raptors, because it was a bit convoluted. It's one of my favorite parts of the story though. This goes back to the 2017 playoffs. Kawhi gets injured by Zaza Pachulia, he gets sidelined for a while, he and the San Antonio doctors get into a pretty weird row about the injury, which essentially fractured Kawhi's relationship with the team. He was out for essentially the whole 2017-18 season, and all of this was publicized. So the Spurs were in a pretty bad spot of having to trade the disgruntled Kawhi with much less leverage. It's not an easy task. Meanwhile, in the East, LeBron James just finished his annual beatdown of the Toronto Raptors, and this one was the worst one out of all the beatdowns. With the first-seeded Raptors against the ragtag Cavs, LeBron was just clowning them, spinning the ball in his hand and then proceeding to swish progressively tough, heavily contested jumpers on the way to an embarrassing sweep, and their head coach getting fired before receiving his Coach of the Year award. After several years of the Lowry-DeRozan era coming to the same end, at the hands of the same man for several years at that point, they decided it was time to break it up and sacrifice one of them. And so there it was, a perfect situation where the Toronto Raptors can move DeMar DeRozan as the trade partner for the San Antonio Spurs. And so it was set. Kawhi Leonard, on the last year of his deal, was traded to the Toronto Raptors for DeMar DeRozan, Jakob Poeltl, and a first. The deal's purpose at the time was just to help the two teams move on from their tough situations, and everyone knew Kawhi wanted to go to a big market team, so he most likely won't re-sign with Toronto. So that's what he was, a rental. So nobody really expected Kawhi and the Raptors to do well, as in championship well, especially in the East, with Milwaukee, Boston, and Philly all being favorites. That was until the regular season started. And once Kawhi started the season with this laugh, you know he was gonna be on demon time. The Raptors actually looked good, and Kawhi Leonard looked like Kawhi Leonard. Like that injury never happened. He did have some very good pieces surrounding him. All-star point guard Kyle Lowry, Freddie VanVleet balling in his breakout season, with his brother Drake watching from the sidelines. Pascal Siakam also having his breakout season on the way to winning the Most Improved Player award. Guys like Danny Green, OG Anunoby, Serge Ibaka, and a crucial piece in Marc Gasol acquired later on that year. Really important parts of the team. They've also just hired promising head coach Nick Nurse, who formerly coached in Britain and the D-League. But of course, the man of the moment, the alpha of that team, the player that actually looked like he'd bring the title to Canada, with a plethora of clutch moments and game winners in his career, a disciple of Kobe Bean Bryant himself, the centerpiece of the team, Jeremy Lin. No, it's Kawhi Leonard. In the regular season, Kawhi averaged then career highs in points and rebounds with 26.6 points and 7.3 boards, to go with 3 assists and almost 2 steals a game. As the best player of the second seed with these stats, he would be a borderline MVP candidate. If only there wasn't a guy averaging 36 points per game and another guy averaging 28, 12, and 6. He also missed 22 games that season, which has been an unfortunate theme for his career. They finished only 3 wins below the Bucks though, and thus let Kawhi time, also known as the playoffs, commence. Time to get serious for Toronto. Looking forward to the potential wars against the Jimmy Butler and Joel Embiid Sixers, Giannis Antetokounmpo's Bucks, Boston Celtics, and their all-star 10-man deep roster. There's no way that team wouldn't make at least the conference finals, right? Time to just quickly take care of the Orlando Magic. Should be pretty straightforward. Whoops. But as usual, what did Kawhi have to say about that? Yeah, it was a gentleman's sweep, as they won the next 4 games on the bounce. Typical Canadian behavior. So, conference semifinals. They got the Sixers, and the matchup just doesn't look great. But the Raptors and Sixers went back and forth and back and forth, and Kawhi was looking more and more like the best player, not only on the floor but in the whole league. Against all-stars like Joel Embiid, Jimmy Butler, and Ben Simmons, Kawhi carried the Raptors on his back as their main offensive guy and their best perimeter defender. That series, he averaged almost 35 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists. The Sixers aren't budging though, and the series eventually devolved to pass to Kawhi or Jimmy Butler and see what they can do in Game 7. Well, Jimmy was tough, but of course, we all know what the clock can do. And we know what he did to the Sixers when the time was now or never.
Defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger?
The only Game 7 buzzer-beating win in NBA history. To cap off a 41-point performance for Kawhi Leonard, this shot cemented his stature as the best player in the world at the time. The Sixers? Well, one look at Joel Embiid gives you all you need to know, really. And the more time goes on, the more I get Joel, because that's the closest they've been to the conference finals. If the process was going to reach further than the conference semifinals, that was the year. And embarrassment at the hands of Boston, Miami, and even the damn Atlanta Hawks followed. Anyway, after that monumental carry job, Kawhi had to pick it up and move, because they've got Giannis and the Bucks in front of them in the conference semifinals. The Milwaukee Bucks won games 1 and 2, and it looked like the end of the road for the Raps. Colin Cowherd was saying stuff like this.
Kawhi Leonard was a shot fighter by the fourth quarter, never hit a basket, only scored 2 points. For the player I'm being told is the best in him, he's out of gas.
His best friend Nick Wright was saying this.
To me, I think Milwaukee is the heavy favorite, and I would be more surprised with the Raptors winning the series than the Bucks winning it in 4 or 5 games.
But of course, Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors didn't go through hell just to get swept by the run-and-dunk man, and they had no choice but to dig in their heels. Cause looking at it, this was the year they were gonna win it all. No LeBron, with some luck on their side, as we saw earlier. And of course, they had the claw, but only potentially that year. And if they lose here, Kawhi's gone, and everything's back to zero again. And so, I actually want to point out some things here, because this is low-key one of the most influential matchups in recent NBA history. And let me tell you why. Toronto's adjustments gave every team in the NBA the blueprint on how to stop Giannis. The Bucks' collapse showed just how important it is to have a stable, level-headed point guard in those types of situations. This probably made them pull the trigger on the Drew Holiday trade years later, which eventually gave them a ring. And it established that Kawhi was the best player in the world. Screw the regular season MVP, because this is what matters. So, first adjustment that worked real well. They stopped putting Pascal Siakam on Giannis at the start. At some point, the Raptors realized that they had arguably the best and most versatile wing defender in the league in Kawhi Leonard, and they put him on Giannis full time. They also had some small offensive adjustments, like increasing the minutes for Fred VanVleet and Norm Powell. But it's the defense that really exposed Giannis' weakness at the time. I like to call it the wall. And it's this defense that Miami used the next year to upset the Bucks as well. It's a pretty simple concept. Just immediately build a wall in front of Giannis the second he drives. Just sag off of him if he doesn't. This worked wonders because the Greek freak still wasn't a good playmaker at the time, and this caused heavily contested layups, three-point misses, or pretty poor kickouts. It worked especially well because Toronto had the big bodies to do it. Kawhi was obviously manning Giannis, but they had guys like Pascal Siakam, Lowry, and Green were very capable, and the very important rim protector in Marc Gasol. This made the Bucks adjust and get even more shooting on the floor, making it a necessity to give more minutes to guys like Ersan Ilyasova and Nikola Mirotic. That was a master plan all along though, because the Raptors' plan of attack when it boils down is to just hunt mismatches for Kawhi and Lowry, and those guys, along with Brook Lopez, are all mismatches in the perimeter. This made it necessary to have someone like Eric Bledsoe on the floor, which was still an advantage for the Raptors. He looked like a headless chicken so many times that series, and important moments too. This is the same guy who dropped 40 on his team 2 years prior. Add the fact that he can't space the floor, and that's all it took to neutralize the Bucks' offense and for Kawhi to get going. The Claw just destroyed the Bucks. This man made Giannis his son and looked automatic from mid-range. The pretty incredible adjustments meant that the Raptors took the next 4 games and went to the NBA Finals for the first time in their history. Kawhi averaged 30, 10, and 4 for the series, putting up 27 points, 17 rebounds, and 7 assists to put the nail in the coffin. So there it was, Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors in the NBA Finals against the Golden State Warriors. The team that, looking back, caused all this to happen to him. Getting injured, falling out with the San Antonio Spurs, and getting traded. They were so close. And even with the juggernaut of Steph, Klay, and the Golden State dynasty in front of them, KD was out. And Toronto fans won't really want to bring this up, but that really did work in their favor. Sure, we know that the Dubs knew how to win without KD, but not by then. They needed him to be there that time, because their system had been KD-centric for the past 3 years. Now that cornerstone of the offense is suddenly gone. It's not an easy adjustment, and the Raptors took full advantage. Pascal held his own. Fred VanVleet, the undrafted third-year player, had an amazing series. Kyle Lowry had an explosive start in Game 6 to close the series out to finally erase the playoff choker allegations. But of course, it was all about one man who averaged 29 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists, who put the final nail in the coffin after nailing free throws, who carried an entire franchise, hell, a whole country, to one of the most unbelievable championships in recent memory. And he rightfully held up that Finals MVP trophy, while the world recognized that it was Kawhi Leonard's time to be known as the best player in the world. So how good was Toronto Kawhi? Well, I just said it. At his peak, he was the best player in the world. 27, 7, and 3 steals in the regular season, 39 and 4 in the playoffs. The focal point on offense, the anchor on defense, ended the Golden State Warriors dynasty 5 years after he also ended the Miami Big Three. And he ended that one season in Toronto the same way, by having the last laugh. Bro had one season in the team and can respectfully be considered their greatest and best ever player, which is pretty ridiculous. Not to mention that he left with some of the coldest photos ever in basketball. This, and this, and this. Not bad for a rental player.